former Admiral Joe Sestak here on the Ed Schultz Radio Show, former congressional member, state of Pennsylvania, and I hope he's running again. Joe, good to have you back.
Good to be back, Ed. Thank you.
Let's address that first. Do you have political plans at this point? What's happening?
Well, nothing today. But
okay.
Ed, I got to tell you, I am not going to rule it out. I think anybody who cares about America and its character over the next decade as we fight for that right balance between rugged individualism and the common good has got to stay engaged somehow, and I'm trying to figure that out.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the answer, and I appreciate you letting me ask it. No answer today, but you're not ruling it out. All right. Your thoughts as a 30-year military guy, now in the political arena, you're seeing the president and his campaign talk about the death of bin Laden and going to do it again. It's also plays big in the 17-minute campaign video that they put together. How do you feel about that?
Well, on the whole, I kind of like, and I got to be up front, where someone does something and then not only walks softly but speaks softly and carries a big stick. But I have to give this president due credit. Democrats, since Vietnam, have been in a deficit of owning national security credentials. But this man has done it. First off, he was the one that ratcheted up the pressure against immense opposition, including from Governor Romney, about violating international airspace over Pakistan to put pressure on al-Qaeda. You saw it again in today's newspapers, where once more we have, despite Pakistan not wanting to, where the president said, if anybody's in there who might harm us here in America, I will go after them. And so I give this president due credit for what he did against Osama bin Laden. And I understand, as de Tocqueville said, in America, everything eventually becomes political. But as a military guy, I'd probably walk a little more softly. But I got to tell you, I think he has reshaped for the much betterment of America, our military, as well as our national security policy.
Well, let's just say that things didn't work out very well on the raid, and it was a snafu, and it didn't work, and bin Laden's still alive. Where would the Republicans be? I mean, you ran for Congress. You've been in the mix. Would the Republicans be using this against the president right now?
Without a question. Just like what happened with Jimmy Carter and the collision of our helicopters on a failed rescue attempt for hostages in Iran. Without any question, they would be doing this because they don't have much else, Ed. When you sit back, what they try to say about the president is, he's not being tough enough on Iran, on Syria, on North Korea. My gosh. Unfortunately, they seem to assume, much like Vice President Biden pointed out, that we've got to go back to the future, to where our military is our first response, and look at the $3 trillion cost of Iraq, where that wasn't a present. Definitely not a clear danger against America. So my take is, once more, it's some rhetoric. And so you're right. You can't help but say, Mr. President, I understand why you are speaking about this success of yours. But I think he's even had greater successes by refocusing our national policy towards China.
And?
Well, look, China is probably the strategic center of gravity for America, whether it's how we want them to help us close down the embargo in Iran, to have North Korea not have nuclear weapons, to stop what almost was a naval battle between the Philippines and even Japan over natural gas and oil in the South China Sea, to Taiwan, where they don't want us to sell any weapons, to Syria to help us close down there, currency and free trade. It's where we are. This president announced over a year ago that that's what we're shifting to, trying to correct something that we didn't do well for the first 8 years of this decade. I think he's got it right, and you can see it in this latest challenge with Chen Guangcheng, where we have a human rights dissident having to balance, as President does, that rightly. I feel he's got to stand strong with that man, but also understanding that he's dealing with a country that has a lot of irons in the fire that we have to make sure they come onto the world stage, not as an enemy, but as someone that we can deal with from trade to security. And I think he's doing that not quite as well as we would like, but he's started us down that path extremely well.
So you think the president, aside from the bin Laden raid and that success story, his total package of foreign policy in dealing with the Chinese, dealing with North Korea, dealing with the Russians, dealing with the missile defense, all of these stuff. He's doing well.
Yes, look, he hasn't brought home a denuclearized North Korea, but nor has anyone in 30 years. But he's gotten them back close to the talking table. Iran, he's put such crippling sanctions on them. Their inflation rate's over 25%, their unemployment rate's over 15%, and they've begun to talk once more. And our military, he understands that you can't any longer measure the size of our military by how many planes or tanks or ships. He actually said it's about dominating cyberspace. For example, it was via different means of cyberspace as well as human intelligence that we found bin Laden. And then he had the guts to make that tough decision. He understands that adversaries come from overseas, and so he's reestablished our relationships with allies and friends of the moment in economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions, and also bringing together closer relationships so that we Americans can be more secure. All I hear from Mitt Romney is, we got to be tougher. And look, he may be a bit more somber, he may be a bit more mainstream as compared to the other Republican candidates that he ran in the primary with, but I got to tell you, Ed, that isn't saying very much.
No, he's just throwing more money at the military and saying we got to be stronger. We really don't get any detail on how he would handle North Korea or the Chinese or the currency situation or any of that stuff.
Not a word about how he would handle this situation over there in China with Chen, which is supposedly in our embassy there. Just saying we've got to stand with him. On the other hand, with our military... What's
that tell you about the underground and the Chinese to get him into that?
I got to tell you, for him to be able to scale the walls, this is a real setback to the image of the Chinese internal security being so pervasive. I mean, Ed, you hit something that very few are talking about.
Yeah.
And but if I could for a moment on our military, what I like about the president is he's trying to bring a sense of accountability into all the agencies of our government, even the military. Ed, in 2008, we had $380 billion of cost overruns in 2008 programs alone. And so it's not that he's trying to just cut, not at all. He's trying to shift money into different areas. So, for example, one aircraft carrier today can do 9 times the number of strikes in 24 hours than that same aircraft carrier could do only 15 years ago. And so he's saying, let's make it 18 times as much by having even better sensors and moving money over to that which would take less for more power. And that, which I think is something that many argued for over a decade ago, and he's led that charge.
Admiral Joe Sestak, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us. I know you'll be in the mix in some form or fashion. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for being out there. Take care.
You bet. Thank you, my friend.